Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Wake Up Missoula. I'm your host, Scott Ramp. It is the last weekend of February. We're moving into March already, and it's kind of gone by really fast. January, February, just so much going on in the news, in the world today. We have definitely some themes when it comes to the news. It has a lot to do with asbestos, cleanups, Libby, Montana, and a lot of different things when it comes to having a clean and livable climate here in Montana in general. So as we talk a little bit more about that, we're going to jump right into your city council, as the city council was back this week. Last week there was President's Day, so the city council did not meet. And so they had two items on the public hearing to reflect the last quarter of 2025's budget. So now they're going to be jumping right into 2026's budget. Every quarter they do an update, any kind of money rearranging. It's basically like balancing the checkbook. And so far the balance in the checkbook of total revenues was $5.8 million and budgeted appropriations by $23 million in order to recognize additional revenue. Additionally, phasing out the old Doherty property as development continues in the George Elmer Greater Mullen project. Public comment focused on green spaces and affordable housing. Rebecca Valentine, resident, spoke about parks and pesticides. Just give it a second.
Children are really vulnerable to pesticides. Their exposure is higher than adults. Their bodies are developing, their nervous systems are less capable of processing all their toxins. And although my husband teaches climate science, I do believe in science, and we know that the research is clear that exposure to pesticides is increasing the risks of cancers, tumors, asthma, ADHD, developmental issues, Parkinson's, birth defects. I mean, this has kind of been tried and true. So I really appreciate that our city values healthy families, and I don't think we should accept the risks of applying pesticides to our parks.
A little bit thinking outside the box. The first would be not to sell.
Oh, sorry about that. I'm having some technical difficulties on my end for sure. But if you heard the previous quote from Rebecca Valentine, she spoke about this is hearkening back to the PFAS argument in the artificial turf, and the seniors livable for a livable climate have been at the city's on the city's case about allowing such a process to occur. And of course, I haven't already heard on the Missoula Current article that just released this week is that the baseball field decided to withdraw any artificial turf moving forward. And as soon as I get this thing going, I'll jump right back in. But for some reason, it doesn't seem like I'm getting a decent signal going out to be able to show you what the people who are talking. So I'm just gonna, there we go. We're back in order. All right, so you always miss one thing in the morning. You know, you get everything all set up and then it's like, oh, I forgot to do the one thing that requires for my show. But all right, so now as we go back into some of the affordable housing concerns, Unified Development Code passed, didn't really have much to reflect affordable housing as a term. Suzette Tissot and Athena Collins kind of tag teamed their public comment to encourage the city to invest more in land trusts moving forward. So as soon as I get this computer to actually work for me, we'll get going.
A little bit thinking outside the box. The first would be not to sell the land that is not already sold, and to keep it in land trust. That is land acquisition is a big driver of costs for a lot of housing. I would suggest we not put it into any more commercial. We do not need another inch of our precious valley floor to be commercialized. Although you won't find a more stronger advocate for local small businesses than me.
To build affording housing. The goal is to have community and recreation spaces. That's what it says here, and to maximize long-term public benefit and reinvest strategically while staying grounded in legal and achievable community expectations. All that sounds fantastic. I just would like, as Suzette said, that it is actually done like that, and there's no selling. And I appreciate the thoughtful work that has gone into these guiding principles. I especially value the focus on long-term benefit, public benefit, and stewardship. I would simply encourage the city to be very cautious about selling publicly owned land.
Yep. And, you know, part of this also has to harken back to the fact that the mayor a couple weeks ago during committee meetings wanted to reassess the assets to determine which ones are more applicable when it comes to, you know, basically making a listing of the top 10 properties in Missoula to figure out which one has the most potential for development moving forward. And part of this is that, you know, when you reinvest in a city, and a brief background on this had to do with the city combing over their own properties and creating a framework for redevelopment on those sites, rating highest achievable goals to least so they can partner up with developers in creating these spaces. However, much to the public's dismay, Unified Development Code didn't reflect affordable housing as the UDC favored supplying for the missing middle. The city believes housing stock will solve affordability crisis, and that's their position for it going on moving forward. The city is also looking to approve zoning extension for the Mullen overall project, and as we talked a little bit about it earlier, for the intro part of the City Council report, Laura Stevens, city planner, talks about the phased development in this area. So they didn't talk too much about this, but roughly they have this computer freezing on me again. This is really frustrating, and I can't reboot the computer while I'm live on the show. So here is Laura.
The subdivision was approved in August of 2023 under the Setup-Kane Neighborhood Master Plan and Form-Based Code. The subdivision is planned to have 101 lots over 2 phases with 641 dwelling units for rent and various multi-dwelling structures. The subdivision's 2 phases are shown here. Phase 1 is blue and phase 2 is yellow. The originally approved phasing plan deadlines for final plats were January 2026 for phase 1 and January 2032 for phase 2.
Okay, and as you can see here on this particular map, this is just one of the many pieces of the puzzle as the George Elmer, Mullen Street, Flynn Lane, all the areas near the site by the Mullen Build project are moving forward and just trying to make sure that everything is going smoothly, you know, as it goes on. Because this has been a long project since before the pandemic, and it's been going on. It's going to be like one of those kind of like 10, 20-year majorly phased division kind of thing. So this has been an ongoing thing for quite some time, but it's one of the biggest housing stock that's happening in the greater Missoula area. Ward 2 definitely being one of the fastest growing communities in Missoula, which also included the Airport Boulevard, which was annexed a couple years ago. So as we jump into committee meetings even further, Climate Conservation and Parks updates their River Ambassador program. So River Ambassador program is an education-based program to help people get educated on how to recreate with the Clark Fork River and just have a better relationship with the natural environment and just be good stewards overall. So here's Brian Chapman, Clark Fork Coalition, talks about this program.
We have been collecting data on the river in town, the Clark Fork River through town, so roughly Sharon fishing access site in East Missoula through till about Russell Street. The first time we did this was 2015. We estimated during peak season about 15,000 floaters taking out in downtown Missoula. We did it again in 2018. We just completed a huge and our most comprehensive inventory of river recreation ever in 2025. And I was blown away. Within an 8-week period, we estimate 34,000 people taking out within a mile and a half of the Clark Fork River in downtown Missoula. I mentioned it to some of you before the meeting started, but this is a bit of a good thing. You know, a lot of this use that we're seeing, these use patterns, the majority of it is within this 8-week crush is single occupancy watercraft. So tubes, folks that can take in and out, go anywhere. A lot of this activity historically was up on the Blackfoot. Our community's effort to clean up the Clark Fork River, and more specifically, Clark Fork Coalition's effort to help move the Milltown Reservoir into a Milltown State Park and clean up the Clark Fork River, has transitioned a lot of that use to the Clark Fork, which is much better. It's an area that is a heavily built environment that we can actually manage that resource and use. We also don't have to, folks aren't driving 22 miles round trip to get to Johnsrud. And for the first time in my career, I feel that we actually are directing recreational use patterns rather than reacting to them.
All right, and part of this also had to do with the fact that, river erosion, mitigation, all that kind of stuff is a major factor in this particular thing. Sorry, my computer's running slow. Let me go back to my notes. Data collection is important and part of the process to reflect the ever-growing needs for recreation, including multiple entry points. The Clark Fork River over the last 10 years, erosion is one of those major issues, and the open space wants to help mitigate, which also caused some issues with recreational access. And Brian talks a little bit more about this as soon as my computer responds. Yeah, it's going to be one of those rough mornings for me. So without further ado, here's Brian again. At some point.
Conflict. Neighbors that were frustrated with the overflow parking happening at all these popular river access sites. There was an intentional crackdown and with Fish, Wildlife and Parks, the city and the county, where sheriffs were actively ticketing and and we spent a whole summer doing that. And when we were having our after action review at the end of the season, it struck me, one of the sheriffs said, "You don't need more enforcement, you need more education." Like, we literally just need people there. Most of the folks we're dealing with want to do the right thing. We're just not communicating what that is. And that was.
And so that's why the ambassador program kind of launched there. And Brian can attest that from what they've determined is that having this constant contact with the people has created a more positive response. And whether that would be volunteer or staff of the Missoula River Ambassador has met with folks in the community and connected with folks using the river to find solutions to get access and have access, well, without violating neighborhoods' personal space and properties. I mean, I remember Bonner being one of those frequent critics of floaters parking off the highway that runs through their community, which also happens to be off Highway 200. So Lily Haynes also talks about some of the boots on the ground a little bit more specifically.
Our program is a field-based seasonal program where all of the partners in the collaborative, the city, the county, conservation district, and Fish, Wildlife and Parks come together to set both the goals, priorities for the River Ambassador for that outreach and education. They also bring in some of the resources that we need to get the program up and running, including financial resources come from all of those partners. Those come into the Clark Fork Coalition, and we manage them to hire a team of seasonal workers, seasonal ambassadors. We hire 4 each year. That has been the magic number for us. And those employees are housed and managed at the Clark Fork Coalition. They come on in early June and stay until about mid-September. And during that time, their primary focus really is being boots on the ground, out at these access points, interacting with the recreators.
So yeah, that's the main goal of this, and they just want to make sure that this is a good stewardship and a good part of this process. And like I said, I'm dealing with some technical problems. Just a very slow computer. Reminds me of going back to dial-up, but regardless, there are some they are not meant to enforce, but to try to work with people in a non-confrontational way by encouraging stewardship of their use. Pack it in, pack it out. In July, some of the statistics saw about 100 floaters, 107 precisely, per hour in the peak of the July season. Lily also talks about the program's prospects moving forward into the future.
So as we kind of pick our heads up and look at where this Missoula River Ambassador program is going, this is my favorite slide probably I've ever gotten to create because I got to put all my river rat jargon onto it. So when we look at the program being rigged to flip, right? That means that going forward, we're all really confident in this program being a long-term asset to our communities. We're not afraid that we're going to get derailed by something that gets a little bit choppy. We have that multi-year agreement in place. The River Ambassador program demonstrates like a lot of community buy-in. We haven't done rigorous social science surveys of river users, but we do talk to them. And what we hear from our community is how grateful they are for this resource that helps them. We hear comments like, wow, Missoula is really progressive. Missoula is really on board with supporting this and supporting natural resources. We're just, the river ambassadors themselves become these like little mini local celebrities over the summer. So the community buy-in and appreciation from the program is definitely there.
And a big part of this is that there'll be mostly patrolling or educating people Thursday through Sundays, especially during the times in which the U-Dash, which is usually used through the peak season for student transportation, also gets used for the floaters over the summer. So some fun news like that for anybody is interested in being just a floater without any kind of additional parking or travel. They have that as an option as well. Give me a second. Like I said, my computer is not responding, and when it does, it doesn't like it. All right, so this information was informational only, and we're moving on to housing redevelopment community planning, which also goes into the 2025 housing strategy update to sustain a healthy vacancy rate. Missoula must add 27 to 37 dwelling units immediately because that's how much supply we are lacking compared to the amount of demand and for housing in the city of Missoula, as they determined through data. Parker Webb, housing policy specialist with community development, presents on this topic, and this is what he has to say about that.
Of a place to call home was to create a cohesive strategy for the city to address barriers and provide financial incentives to produce and preserve diverse, healthy, and safe homes that all Missoulians can afford. In the 6 years since adoption, housing in Missoula has gotten even more challenging. Sale prices and rents have continued to rise, although they're slightly stabilizing now, and they rise faster than wages are rising for Missoula residents. So the 2019 strategy's recommendations set to align city resources, planning efforts, and workflows to address the housing challenges. 4 broad categories of recommendations were established. Those were track and analyze progress for continuous improvement, align and leverage existing funding resources to support housing, reduce barriers to new supply and promote access to affordable homes, and partner to create and preserve dedicated affordable homes.
All right. So there was, kind of like the overview of kind of what they're doing. And, this is like, if anything, this part of the meeting was more informational. And just go into my notes. Slowly but surely, the city determined that developers tend to stay away from the communities that have an affordable housing requirement in the code/zoning. The city has always done an incentive model to encourage developers to work with the city and provide affordable housing components to the project overall. Developers have the links to the contractors, and a lot of times city contracted stuff usually has to do with some redevelopment process, but not wholeheartedly, basically being a developer themselves. Parker also talks about these programs how they will pivot moving forward in this new framework.
Reviewing the prior strategies, our housing team and Root Policy Research established a framework for addressing how we want these strategies updated. The primary one being acknowledging that we are funding constrained and we want to have as much impact as we can with limited funds. This is primarily tied to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. In the past, we've researched several strategies and methods to capitalize the trust fund, and it is very well set up for a significant impact once it is significantly and sufficiently funded. However, at this point, it is not sufficiently funded, so Root Policy's recommendations were to establish strategies through a constrained lens, a funding constrained lens, so that we can still provide significant impact with a limited amount of funds.
All right, so that's the big part of it, is limited amount of funds. And during the Biden administration, a lot of infrastructure improvements, housing programs were initiated during the rush to do all these kinds of things. And where the Trinity Navigation Center, the Villaggio, were great additions to the community of Missoula back in spring of 2023, it did not meet the constant growing demand for more affordable housing, and thus we got stuck even more. So more housing got built, but it still didn't keep up with the demand. And so now they're trying to figure out what they can do without that kind of level of funding moving forward, because now it has to rely even more so on developers. And unlike the Rivara project, the amount of work / public-private partnership needed to accomplish this feat was a long process. And while this program is the first of its kind, data collection tends to be main focused on steering the ship towards more dwelling units overall. Funding, preservation assistance, build and track are the 5 staples they aim to achieve for the future of housing in Missoula. Parker is also concerned that the Housing Trust Fund cannot be the end-all be-all for affordable housing in the future. So this is what he had to say.
But since our main strategy moving forward is how we can successfully capitalize the trust fund, some of these strategies may need to get reevaluated, and some priorities may elevate that we couldn't elevate earlier. So some of these non-funding constraint strategies that we could look at.
Well, all right, I'm back. When it rains, it pours. Geez, I'm just having literally the worst technical problems this morning, and my mic power went out. All right, so as we talk further about this, geez, this is, TIFs are also being used for workforce housing options through the county as they aim to use those funds to help build out infrastructure for better rates of housing. The state legislature opened the door to what the city called vertical funding, which is a big part of the Rivara's North Side Scott Street project. Parker also refers to the city-owned property, also had to do with how they can use this to help make affordable housing an option. So this is what he had to say about that as it compares to that, the Missoula Commons.
But part of the conversations that happened in the redevelopment task force was long-term, the city should be evaluating how it is acquiring parcels and properties. So kind of the next step after, once we've kind of dealt with the 45 acres that are currently under municipal use that we don't need. Just keeping affordable housing in mind when we are looking at that. If there's an opportunity for the city to play in acquiring to make infill development more feasible, then that's something that we should pursue. Similar to how the city acquiring the Midtown Commons property is what is expediting that project to actually move forward. It doesn't necessarily need to all be in terms of developing affordable housing on site, though. We can always later have a land sale that then gets money to the trust fund so we can develop in a more opportune location instead of developing on scattered sites if they're not really feasible.
All right, so that's one of the bigger takeaways from this particular meeting was the fact that just because they don't develop the Midtown Commons as affordable housing per the outcry of some of the local residents doesn't necessarily mean they can't use the money in terms of cash in lieu, which means that they leverage the site and the city-owned property to invest in the Housing Trust Fund. Midtown Commons is a hot topic for many citizens in the Southgate Triangle neighborhoods and surrounding areas. You know, the city's focus on the site has to do with parkland dedication, with the developer offsetting costs to promote more green spaces in lieu of the PROST program, which was a big part of the UDC passage yeah, I guess that's the word I'm looking for, during this particular time. So it's interesting that some folks were not pleased with the more market rate housing on city-owned land, that they could be used for affordable housing. But as you heard Parker allude to the fact that dollars generated by this development could be used to pay for affordable housing elsewhere. So a lot of times it's like, we can't necessarily pick and choose what we choose to be affordable housing. Just because it worked here doesn't mean it's going to work there. And they're just trying to figure out what the best move moving forward is, because with this development happening at the Midtown Commons, not to mention the Fox Triangle, that development with the Doubletree Hotel that's happening. The organization that also runs the Doubletree is doing the hotel, and the former Fox Triangle, aka a former dump slash. There's just a lot of things that the money that's being generated just by having that development happen there is going to be going into the Housing Trust Fund. So that's part of what they're trying to do with that moving forward. And so that's kind of how I'm going to end my city council report. I'm definitely going to have a lot more technical difficulties moving forward, just because the computer is running now it feels like it's running Windows 95 speed. So bear with me. Here are some of the new programs going to be airing on MCAT, and I'm going to use this break to take a deep breath and get back into order. So without further ado, here is some of the new programs airing on MCAT. You can watch it right now on MCAT's YouTube page at MCAT TV Missoula.
It's also lightweight. You can drop it and it won't break. To me, it's this representation of indigenous ingenuity that was developed since time immemorial. And what is typically on here is you see a lot of designs like this and patterns and designs that are tribally specific. I'm not an expert always in all of that. I can't always tell you like which tribe made which painting or which one belongs where. Sometimes they're clan specific or family specific or tribal specific. But if you do know that stuff, when you see somebody wearing this, you would know what tribe they're from. So not only is this an object that's functional and protective, it's also like an indicator of where you're from. It's identity by design. And
we accept donations of new and gently used art, music, and hobby supplies. So that can really be most anything that you can use for art. We've been very thankful and grateful that the community has donated so much that we've had to limit our donations to just usable art supplies and not necessarily like toilet paper tubes and things like that. Although in the future, I definitely want to grow big enough to where we can accept those fun random items that we all save, the containers and the jars and the lids, because we know they're valuable. So I really hope in the future that we can save those items for everyone and reuse them.
My next door neighbor, who I'd lived next door to for like 23 years, she had never heard me read. She'd read a few poems, and I'd given her a couple of different books, and she said, like, "Do you have to use those words?" And I'd say, well, I think I do. Yeah, they kind of go along with, what that person is saying, so it kind of has to be, oh, you don't need those words, she said. And so anyway, she came, and I abused her with a few words, but not too many. But she had never heard her. She had never heard me read before, so that was like a near and dear to my heart. She just passed away here a month or so ago at 93. And so she told me this story one time. We were standing in the alley, and I thought, damn, that'd make like a really good poem.
In order to save the rattlesnake, a very important step had to be taken, and that is to face the fact that Montana Power Company owned 21,000 acres in the Upper Rattlesnake. Our history of the land grants, the railroad land grants and checkerboard ownership, and then homesteading that came out a little differently, but do you know what I mean about checkerboard homesteading? You look at a map and it literally looks like a checkerboard with every other section privately owned. So 21,000 acres 12 miles of the Rattlesnake Creek frontage. You can imagine how the developers were eyeing that saying, oh boy, let me at it.
Born in the 1830s in Tennessee, but eventually made her way out to the Great Falls and Cascade area. You're probably most familiar with her because she's the first Black woman to have a postal line by the U.S. Postal Service. But one of the things that I like to mention about her as well is that she actually owned a cafe for a brief period of time, and she fed anybody who came in, regardless if they could pay or not. And that will sound very resounding to a woman that I'll talk about a little later. The cafe did not last long, because if you're not bringing in a profit, businesses do not tend to last long, but the impact that she made on Cascade has long outlasted her life.
Hey guys, we're back, and let's talk about some movies that are coming out this weekend. It's time for Pre-critic, where I judge movies based on nothing but the synopsis, maybe the trailer. This time we're doing Scream 7, and I've seen half of them before, like the reboot or whatever, but I never been one, I know everyone's been waiting for this one since Sidney is back again to fight Ghostface again. Unlike number one, this was made to be a meta take on horror movies with High School. The second one, Revenge and College Kids. The third one about Hollywood, and the fourth and fifth were more of a fanboy crush on the new generation. And the sixth one for Ghostface felt more like Batman and had a lot more money behind him. And finally, we go back to the house where it started it all. Watch as the mess of a movie that almost failed to lift off after the young star spoke politically and was canceled, and many left, so they'd have to return to made-upville, Washington or whatever, I don't know, some kind of small sleepy town again to fight what seems to be return of the original killers. Who knows? And at this point, who really cares? All right, up next, we got Bring the Law. At this point, Scream should just have a government task force. This movie is about a badass who had enough of those of those movies, which also has Mickey Rourke and a bunch of other actors, must fight the bad guy with the help of a disgraced cop hell-bent on clearing his name and catching the bad guy. Notwithstanding, corruption in the police and fighting crime on all levels is probably a norm, but not really, more action, but filmed like an action movie because the dialogue is probably garbage. Up next, we got a bunch of other movies coming out. Pillion, gay couple goes full comedy and as a gay man looking to be learn to dominate his own heart while learning more about his mysterious spiker, Bo, who happens to be one of the Skarsgård boys trying his hand at comedy. Then we got Epic, Elvis Presley in concert, documentary following an aging Elvis towards the end of his final tour, and a documentary of footage upscaled for IMAX. So like the Beatles documentary, it'll show behind the scenes but ultimately make it look like a palatable, tight an hour and 30 minutes. Then we got Dreams. Can't make this one up. An illegal Mexican immigrant starts shacking up with a rich white lady in one of those white savior movies that makes it seem like she has more to risk in a whirlwind romance with this guy, but ultimately makes our current political climate on immigration be the focal point. But it's also romance. So up next we have a new Dubbin stuff for you guys. This one's from the 1930s talkie comedy, Just Imagine. Like I said, my computer is now... Give me a second. Give it a second. It'll work at some point. Without further ado, here's Dubbin stuff.
Well, you see here, I'm not going to live forever. I'm going to need men like you to carry on this whole thing that I'm trying to do here. And it all has to do with stars. I got a big telescope in this penthouse, and I want you to look through it regularly and, clean it up once in a while. You think you can do that? You think you'll be able to clean my lens and do all sorts of things like that? Maybe map out some of the stars, maybe discover a new planet, maybe even Pluto might be a planet again. All it takes is a little bit of thing called yes. All you got to do is say yes, so please say yes, please. You think I'd want to stay here all day and look at some stars for you? I beg your pardon? Yes. I mean, you don't have to work days. This is a night thing. You just have to look at some stars at the night. You think that's possible? You think you can do that? So you want me to sacrifice my nights in lieu of searching? Well, discovery is not sacrifice. It is knowledge of the future, of the stars, of things seen. I don't know about that. Well, I'll make a deal with you. Once a week, you look at the stars, discover something new and fun, you can write it down, put it in the book, and my team will look at it. Well, it depends upon the night of the week. I have a comfy spot at this bar down the street, you know? It's really important to me. Well, the mysteries of the universe have a little bit more precedent over mysteries of the bottom of the glass. So, would you at least consider? I don't have to consider anything, especially from a dirty old man like you. You think I'm going to just look through your lens and clean it? No, thank you. No, thank you, sir. I think this whole argument is getting out of context. Now you see here? Now I'm yelling too. I don't want to yell. I want to be a reasonable person. And there you are just standing there, yelling at me. That's not fun. That's not cool. Grab a seat. Well, maybe I did overreact. This is a negotiation. We have to talk. What day of the week? Well, it's your choice. Whatever works for you. As long as it's once a week, maybe a Saturday one week. I can't do weekends. You crazy person. How dare you? Well, my observatory has its own bar, so I don't see why you're fretting over this. You might have your own drinking corner. It's pretty cool. Man, you come in here all hot and heavy with this whole negotiation thing. You have all the cards. I'm just trying to pass on my legacy. Well, it's never quite that simple. Well, I swear to you, it really is that simple. You know, I didn't have any kids. I spent too much time looking at the stars, and now I'm fretting the fact that I'm running out of time, and I need somebody to look at the stars for me. You don't have to do it as much as me. You might even find a nice lady. Does this job come with a wife? Well, maybe some of my older subordinates have some daughters they can just introduce you to. You're not weird or anything, are you? Not that I'm trying to judge, because you're going to be very rich in a few seconds here. You hear that? I don't have much time left on this world. There, you see? Your bones still work. Wow, this sounds like a great opportunity. I really appreciate it. Well, I'll be on my way.
All right, we are back. Let's talk about some news that are happening in and around the world today. Ex-President Bill Clinton will meet with Congress this morning as his wife Hillary showed up to the private disposition on Thursday. Despite the Epstein connection, Hillary claimed that she never had interactions with the child groomer and leader of the vast blackmail network that involved very rich and influential people. The closed-door deposition in Chippewa, New York, will mark the first time former president has been compelled to testify for Congress, or to Congress. Bill Clinton has not been accused of any wrongdoing, yet lawmakers are grappling with the accountability in the United States, it looks like, at a time where men around the world have been toppled by the high-powered post for maintaining their connection with Epstein after he pleaded guilty in 2008 to state charges in Florida for soliciting prostitution from an underage girl. While that's all happening on the other side of America here in Montana, we have some issues coming after our clean and livable climate. Libby will not be getting a settlement from asbestos exposure that has been affecting folks in that community since 1920s, ultimately resulting in litigation leading to the 2009 declaration of a public health emergency. While Burlington Northern Santa Fe was not part of the conversation when it was with Montana Rail Link in the past, so part of this, the operation at the time, some of their rail yard had cancerous substances, otherwise known as asbestos. Court ruled in favor of Burlington Northern Santa Fe from the wrongful deaths related to asbestos years ago. Usually when a community sues a corporation, they have money to put into appeals for a long time. And with this recent ruling, many living in Libby may not get the justice in time. And so it's like, you change owners, and so the owner doesn't know, then you have to sue them. It's like, hey, you have these things, you have to adhere to these standards of a clean and livable climate based on Montana, and they're just like, nah. That's usually kind of how it works, and then there's lawyers, a lot of mitigation, a lot of things like that. But according to Montana Free Press on the recording on this, who reported on this, in the unanimous finding, an Oregon-based panel of 3 judges from the 9th Circuit Court of Appeals reversed a 2024 Montana federal court ruling that asbestos contamination at Burlington Northern Santa Fe's rail yard has contributed to the 2020 deaths of Joyce Walder and Thomas Wells. They also shipped asbestos-tainted vermiculite products nationwide from the 20-acre site downtown Libby throughout much of the 20th century. Imagine you're a major company that oversees multiple assets, and one of them caused mesothelioma in a town of about 2,700 people. Libby, if anything, is what East Palestine, Ohio is looking like in the future. 3 years since, the victims of the derailment have yet to get their compensation. Libby has the tumultuous history going so far back that even Max Baucus in 2009 said that some choice words about the community trying to fight for their clean and livable climate in their town. Public health experts have estimated that hundreds of people died and thousands were sickened by the asbestos-related illness related to widespread vermiculite mining operations. However, this is one of many asbestos claims in Montana as a whole looking to get a piece of the pie from the railroad company's part in shipping these materials across our state. They also spent much of the time of the 20th century shipping asbestos-tainted vermiculite products, the materials that have extracted from the mine owned by W.R. Grace. The plaintiff's attorney argued that in court in 2024 that the byproducts of these materials also contaminated with asbestos built up in the soil around the company's rail yard. In legal filings, their attorney strongly denied that the railway knew of the toxic effects of asbestos until after journalists and federal health regulators unveiled Libby's widespread contamination in the 1990s. So 1990s, took about 10, 20 years, now we're in the 2020s, still doing it with the aftermath. Montana Constitution for a clean, livable climate can only go so far as those ideals have been tested many times with little changes when it comes to national and international companies having used our resource state, that is Montana. And this is a big upset to Missoula's own baseball field here. Missoula's baseball field, the Oregon field, artificial turf. The paddleheads have withdrawn this as an option, with the city controlling the interests of the field from this request to the city brought the concerns to the concerns of the citizens and nonprofit Seniors for a Livable Climate. And according to Laura Lundquist with the Missoula Current, on Thursday, Jeremy Drake of the nonprofit MT Plastic Free was surprised to receive an email from Dale Bickle, City of Missoula Chief Administrative Officer, saying that Big Sky Professional Baseball has withdrawn its request for artificial turf in Oregon Field. The keyword PFAS, which since 2019 have been linked to cancer-causing materials used in many, if not most, artificial turfs used in various fields from Washington Grizzly Stadium to Fort Missoula Regional Park. The overall argument had to do with the pointing out that the city's own agenda, the 0 by 50 waste program, not to mention the proximity to the Clark Fork River, which provides 80% of the drinking water to the aquifer. This was also done by the president of the baseball team, Matt Ellis, Big Sky Professional Baseball, who opted out of putting in artificial turf. So far, the plan for the field still is uncertain, and if they continue, the natural grass will cost them $1.6 million for the paddleheads next season. And since we're still on the topic, SCOTUS is actually talking about doing a major case this fall, and they may not even do it. So this is against Exxon, and other oil companies to pay billions of dollars to help governments grapple with the cost of climate-related damages such as natural disasters, rising sea levels, and drought. The Supreme Court said Monday that it will hear from oil and gas companies trying to block lawsuits seeking to hold the industry liable for billions of dollars in damages linked to climate change. The conservative majority court agrees to take up on the case from Boulder, Colorado, one of the multiple lawsuits alleging that the companies deceive the public and how fossil fuels contribute to climate change. Thus far, this potential for SCOTUS to adhere to the lower court's decision because of a lot of big decisions by SCOTUS could open the door to bad actors disregarding clean environmental standards while eroding in the current administration are not going quietly into the night. And so far, this case isn't going to happen until the fall if they decide to weigh in on the Colorado's case. And as we're talking about this, speaking of laws, here in Montana, a conservative think tank looks to overhaul the Montana Constitution in 2030. This is every 20 years. We're able to hold a convention to basically determine whether or not we want to update or change the Constitution of the state of Montana. And so this is an Coeur d'Alene-based Mountain State Policy Center alleged the Constitution needs a rewrite every 20 years, like I said. And the 50th anniversary of 6 years ago featured those in attendance. And the biggest takeaway from those conversations was the removal of the politicians and political parties in favor of Montana citizens looking to be part of this convention to write their Montana laws that reflect their needs to get away from dark money and special interest groups, aka the Copper Kings left the bad taste in many Montanans' mouths as they left mining operations and majority industry left the state as trends changed towards a global economy. This think tank was more or less an attempt to update to reflect the current times that we are in, but whether or not this will be something worth pursuing in 2030 is still up in the air. And speaking of air, Montana is lying about a clean and livable climate. was odds with big business and industry from affecting our natural environment, giving teeth to many lawsuits for cleanups. And however, as the current administration ramps up industry AI data centers, clean, livable climate might be a barrier which goes against the bottom line, money interests. This and the fact that voting rights and the reproductive rights protected against the GOP national agenda to complicate those processes with state Supreme Courts upholding those principles based on our own Montana state constitution. What will happen? Time will tell, and the pendulum is swinging pretty wide to the left as 2026 is the beginning of the end of Greg Gianfortes, the governor of our state of Montana, who's been advocating for changing our constitution, is in their second and last term as the governor of Montana. Even if they manage to drum up support to update the constitution, they'll have to deal with the new governor who's ending their 4-year term to convince Montana that the Constitution is not applicable for today. So there you go. Those are some of the news that are happening in and around the world today. And of course, this symmetrical month, that is February, is wrapping up this weekend. We have a lot of events happening. First, MCAT will be hosting the Scouts of America for private use of our facilities on Saturday. So most of MCAT events for Saturday are closed and canceled. Confident color mixing for journaling is starting this morning at 9 a.m. at Montana Natural History Center. Bonner Park is hosting the Stroller Strides at 9:30. The Little Club's Playgroup, indoor sports fun for young kids at 10 a.m. at the Sports Barn. Open curling at the Glacier Ice Rink has probably gotten more popular since Canada cheated, I guess. But Missoula Food Bank meal distribution at 10 a.m. Tiny Tales at Missoula Public Library at 10:30 a.m. having those kids read. Watercolors and Yarns every Friday at noon on the 4th floor of the Missoula Public Library. Pop-up plant hangers and plant swap at Giving Art to Missoula starting today at noon. All Bill Art Club at Base. Brown Bag and Bones at the Natural History Center with paleontologist Jason C. Poole. Young Adult Writers Group at 3:30 starting here at the Missoula Public Library. Learn computer animation with Blender at 4 p.m. tonight here at MCAT. Final Friday at the Confluence Center. They're doing a closing reception artist talk. You want to check that out. Tango Dance Party at the 6 p.m. Montana Moonlight Studio. OPO at the Wilma's playing some electronic music starting at 7 p.m. Missoula Folklore Society is doing some contra dance at the Missoula Elks Lodge at 7 p.m. Karaoke at the Jack Saloon at 7 p.m. Leaf and Quiet's Jazz Off the Rails, open jazz play at 7 p.m. Westside Theater presents Glitter and Doom is a futuristic sci-fi satire theater dance work that looks to impending doom felt by cast members in America. This has happened at Westside Theater. It's at 7:30 p.m. This is a traveling dance troupe from Arizona. Wolf and the Moose at Old Post at 7:30 p.m. playing some folk music. Odyssey of the Stars. This is the College of Arts and Media Fusion Gala at the 2026 University of Montana. They're doing this at the Montana Theater. The College of Arts and Gala invites you to this. This is a celebrating the students. Stars as a dynamic showcase of vibrant work from students in dance, journalism, music, theater, and visual arts. Contra Brazil is doing a choir at the ZAC at 7:30 tonight. Opio, I just said that. Okay, Boom Goes the Drums at Monks at 9 p.m. Owen Ross Band is at the Union Club playing at 9 p.m. And then for Saturdays, we got our markets and such at the Locals Only and the Badlander, and also we have it at the Southgate Mall next to Shields. Spring Flower Photography Tips at Lifelong Learning Center at 8:30 p.m. They do a lot of programs and classes for people who want to pay for one class only. Heart Savers Pediatric First Aid. They do CPR and certification in AED. Families First. Sorry, not Families First. Family Fun Time at Mismo Gymnastics at 9 a.m. Do-it-yourself home repair plumbing at Lifelong Learning Center at 9:30 a.m. Coffee and Clay, sculpting animal faces at Throw Ceramics on Saturday morning at 9:30 a.m. Makerspace walk-in hours, so open space to do 3D printing and more at the Missoula Public Library at 10 a.m. on the first floor. Line dancing at Missoula Senior Center at 10 a.m. The Orchards Show at the Karis Nursery. See all those plants and all sorts of succulents at 10 a.m. at Karis Nursery. Snow Joke Half Marathon at Cedar Lake Elementary School at 11 a.m. Storytime at Missoula Public Library at 11:30 a.m. on Saturdays. Rooted, Enhancing Children's Wellbeing Through Nature Workshop. Missoula Public Library is hosting kids age 5 to 12. And they're invited to a series of nature workshops led by students at the University of Montana's Frankie Global Leadership Initiative. Each week explores new topic and activities such as seed planting, paper making, and bird feeding. So this is a weekly program that starts tomorrow at 1 p.m. Linux User Group. So this is people who want to use Linux and just kind of want to quit Mac or PC and just kind of learn to use a computer and have a computer customized completely for their own self. Linux is a computer software that essentially is the backbone of all computers, Windows and Mac included. So Linux, they're doing a user group here at the library at 1 p.m. in the afternoon. 15th Annual Winter Brewfest at Caras Park at 1 p.m. You can't miss that. They usually do 3 every year, and then there's all different kinds of brewfests that happen at Caras Park. Singing Residents, Singing Ice Out, Bear Track Bridge is doing a protest at 1 p.m. You can't miss it because it's going to be right next to Caras Park Brewfest. Grizz basketball game versus Portland State at 2 p.m. at the Adams Center. Saturday Tiny Tales at Missoula Public Library, afternoon at 3 p.m. Odd Smut Book Club at Odd Pitch Brewing Company at 6 p.m. Jules Jensen album release party at the Zootown Arts Community Center at 7 p.m. Emo Night at the Wilma at 8 p.m. playing some DJ music, dressed in your best black and one colored hair streak. Dueling Pianos and the Josh Farmer and Kyle Curtis will be playing at Stave and Hoop at 8 p.m. Karaoke at Westside Lanes at 9 p.m. Blue Collar Band at Union Club at 9 p.m. DJ Chris Moon is wrapping up your Saturday at 10 p.m. on at the Badlander. Sunday, you got spring soccer season, Micro Strikers at Fort Missoula Regional Park starting at 9 a.m. on Sunday. Sunday Stitch and Bitch at 12 noon at the Space DIY Studio. Tech Cafe, free tech support at Missoula Agent Services on Sunday at 1 p.m. Learn about your computer. If you have troubles with the Mac, PC, Android, and more, Tech Cafe is the place to be at Missoula Agent Services Sunday at 1 p.m. Winter, Sunday, beginning clay pottery at the Clay Studio of Missoula. They do these intro classes on Sunday starting at 1 o'clock. Salsa Dance Clock at Rocky Mountain Ballet. Dark Money film screening and the Montana Plan Q&A. This is at Missoula Public Library. They hosted this before. In Montana, we have a unique opportunity to incorporate dark money in our state, and this documentary and Q&A will help us get the information out there and hopefully even get the word out to have the whole point of the Montana Plan is to essentially control who donates to what. And so instead of having outside money coming into the state of Montana to affect our elections, we want to make sure that people who run in Montana elections are for Montana, by Montana, and raise money in Montana. So that's part of the Montana Plan. Drammed Tough Trivia at the Dram Shop at 6 p.m. on Sunday. Draftworks is doing jazz. Pub Sing at the UM Flat at 6 p.m. Swing Dance at Ed Norton Big Band is doing some jazz swing dancing at 6:30 p.m. at the Zac, and then wrapping things up is karaoke at the Sunrise Saloon, rocking karaoke. Enjoy all that stuff and more. I got done pretty early this morning. Let's see what's going on in terms of that deposition happening currently at the Bill Clinton testifying everything. If I'm going to AP News, former Bill Clinton is testifying Friday, blah, 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 the closed door deposition, blah, blah, blah. Not much going on there. Yeah, I don't know. It's not really just kind of, nothing new. It's just, it is a closed deposition for sure. And there's probably some information coming in and out of it. But it's kind of kooky because I thought this was going to be one of those Congress hearings where they're speaking on camera. So it's kind of kooky comparatively. So yep, that's kind of what's happening there. Everything just feels like things are about to happen. So we're just trying to wait and see how it all works out. So while we wait and see, I'm going to wrap up my show. And for Wake Up Missoula, I'm Scott Ramp. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Take care, and I'll see you later.